The Wild Tameless is about expanding our sphere of awareness into greater fields of consciousness. Our guests share their wisdom found from branching out into the unseen realms through alternative philosophy and mystical experiences. We focus on the soul component of the human experience and also touch on mind, body, and heart as we introduce pragmatic practices to create a meaningful and fulfilling life. We touch on modalities of health, ceremony, and ritual to help people harmonize their own energy and open up to the magic around them. The Wild Tameless is nature. It's the human spirit. It's music, art, and creation itself. This podcast is about helping people open to the great mystery so that we can collectively remember our place in the web of life and reorient our way forward for generations to come. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Kyle Dow. All right, welcome to this episode of The Wild Tameless. I have the great pleasure of sitting here with my good friend, Brad Samuels. Welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Kyle. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah,
Brad and I have known each other, for 5 or so years, and we've developed a really close relationship in that time. And we've had the privilege of sitting in many ceremonies and sharing many different life experiences together. And we very much share some similarities in our worldview and our life path. And it's a pleasure.
Yeah.
And so one question that I like to ask my guests to kind of get the ball rolling is describe your current set and setting.
My current setting, that's a good question. My current set and setting. So my current set and setting, I am coming out of a very difficult period of life, and a lot of transformations are in cycle right now. Like there's a lot of awakenings happening right now, a lot of things I have to let go of, and behaviors I have to let go of. And it's an interesting set and setting because it's very much not like, oh, I want to change it. It's like, I have to change some shit because I can't go back to the difficulties of before. So that's kind of the privilege and gift of difficulties is that's part of the set and setting, being able to honor and respect the challenges and be grateful for the teachings. So I've found myself many times crying over something challenging while being like, thank you for the teaching.
Beautiful.
So that's the setting. And it's beautiful because transformation is underway in a positive light. It's like a rising from the ashes feeling.
Something caught my interest there. You said you can't go back. So what's that feeling? Can you say more about that?
What did I say? Can't go back.
It was like you have to face this thing. There's no going back.
Yeah, it's become so. It's like when there's things that are undercover, you can keep a lot of things undercover, and still cruise along quite harmoniously. And I feel like there's certain things I can't do that with anymore because it's not harmonious. I can't sweep under the rug because I'm way too aware of it, and I'm too aware of how it impacts the world around me and others and people I love. So the only path forward is to transform those things, modify them. Yeah, and I think there's also like you can't avoid your calling anymore. You know that one.
Yeah.
You can't avoid your calling anymore. And I think our whole world in some way is going through that. It's avoiding our calling, getting caught up in what's new and exciting and trendy and all sorts of stuff like that society has a hold on. But there's like a deep whisper in your soul. And the whisper is getting louder for millions of people, maybe billions, I don't know. But the whispers are getting louder to wake up to the transformation that is happening, and it's going to happen. It's already happening. You just either wake up sooner or later. And it's interesting, I find too, because the path is it's challenging to not wake up to these things and not hear it, but it's also challenging to answer the call. So like there's no way out of the challenge either, I feel. At least that's my experience, is like there's no getting out of the challenge on this one. Yeah. So courage is like paramount.
Absolutely. And a saying that I like is the difference between a man and a king is that a king cannot look away or does not look away. Yeah. And so it's like once you know, you can't not know. So then you have a responsibility to lean into that uncomfortable thing, which is in this context, a moment of transition. And it would be a disservice to us and others to not do that And at some point, it becomes too painful inwardly to not listen to that calling, to not do what is ours to do.
Yeah.
And so, as you mentioned, the collective kind of transition and waking up, can you put more like language to what that is, or what you think that is, what we're going through?
Well, what I think we're going through is a long-term trend, probably over many hundreds of years, but it's a total. I don't even want to use the word collapse, but the systems that we've had in place on multiple frontiers, whether that's political, like ecological, like economic, those structures are falling apart. And it's really scary because those structures, for me, I was born into these structures and they give so much safety. A sense of safety is created through that. So on one level, I don't want them to fall apart because it's scary, the idea of them falling apart. But if we keep going down that path of ignorance and staying in these structures are not enlightened structures. So it's just as terrifying, like if we keep going down that path. And so I think that's what I'm speaking to, is the transformation is a moving away. It's a death of something so that something new can be reborn. And I have a feeling in my heart that what's being reborn is going to be a very beautiful new world, which I might not live to see the extent of that in this lifetime, but I'm part of this change. And that's a big part of the thing that I'm realizing is like I'm part of something and I have a role in it, and I'm trying to find out exactly what that role is, but it's already happening, and I'm already part of this transformation. I'm already one of the, I don't want to call it necessarily even leader, but I'm one of the earlier people that is like can't not answer the call, which is why I keep finding myself in ceremony, why I keep finding myself in places that I'm like, how the heck did I end up in this circle? Like even with you this year in the Vericuta Desert, I'm always baffled. I'm like, I cannot believe I'm even present in this circle at this like one of the most incredible ceremonies. Like, how did I even get invited? How did I end up here? So there's something special that you ask. For me, I ask myself, I'm like, how did this? Can I keep ending up in these circles? So it means something. And so to not answer the call is like would be to like stop showing up for those. But I don't want to because they're so beautiful, even though they're so challenging.
Now we touched on that.
Better than going to hockey practice.
It's better than going to hockey practice. You know, I had that realization a while ago because I've played like sports my whole life basically. And all the amount of like hours and devotion I showed towards these team sports, like they're wonderful. Like it was very formative in who I am, and I learned so much through that process.
Yeah,
and in some sense, it's not applicable now. Like there's some transferable characteristics and skill sets, but it doesn't apply to my present life. Other than I'm super athletic.
Yeah, and maybe the devotional part, like to put so much effort into something.
Yeah.
Right. You put a lot of effort into team sports, and now I see you put in all this effort into your devotional practices to reconnect to the earth and to nature. And I mean, it's kind of how we do one thing is how we do everything in a certain way.
Yeah. So I'm going to circle that idea back to you. But first, I do want to say that, like, if we collectively reoriented ourselves away from team sports, like, we could do some really great things collectively. Like, it's the greatest collective waste of energy, almost to a certain extent. Like, think about all the man hours that's put into team sports and all the money that's put into team sports.
Like professional athletic team sports, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And the whole culture around it.
Exactly. Idea of the Colosseum, how the Colosseum was just a distraction for the people. So they weren't aware of what was important and happening around them. And we're constantly distracted, right? Looking away from the meaningful thing. And meanwhile, the people who have all the resources and kind of like control the world a little bit are doing whatever they want. And nobody's in objection to that.
That's actually a really interesting reminder to like refer to the Colosseum system, but really to distract from the truth, spiritual thing going on around. That's very much the case today. Yeah, it's the same tactics being used.
And now we have all these other modes of distraction with our screens and our phones and everything else. So attention is a commodity, and also a resource, and we have to be aware of what we do with it. And to kind of blend that back into what you're speaking to about devotion, I'm curious if you could say more about what you're devoted to and like what devotion actually means.
Well, I mean, devotion can be to anything. The word devotion just means it's like a very beautiful, loving, commitment to something. So you can be devoted to hockey, you really can, but it's the level of depth to it may not really meet the needs of the higher realms, right? Because what do you even if you're in a team sport, what are you trying to accomplish? You're trying to like score goals. Like, what's a goal? What does that even mean, right? But devotion, I think for me, is it's really finding the most beautiful way to connect your heart to something that's the most meaningful. So it's like what is the absolute most meaningful thing? And it's something you've always brought to the table. This search for meaning, man's search for meaning, just your own search for meaning. And we want to devote ourselves to the most meaningful thing. Now, for me, I wasn't always connected to my own spirituality. I didn't, even in the last several years, I didn't really even make the choice to decide life was spiritual. Just it's a decision. It's a choice to take life in a spiritual way, and that was a huge pivot for me. But at this point, I'm looking for the most beautiful way to devote myself to God, to creation, to the magic of what has happened here, and finding the most meaningful ways to pray and to enjoy that process. Right? So devotion should be for me, I want it to be a very beautiful process. It's a lot of fun, and it's really meaningful, and I want to do it. I enjoy doing it. It's not a chore. If it's a chore, I won't do it. So I think, but devotion for me should be something that really fills your heart.
And so what are your practices?
As of late, singing has become, I think, one of the core practices. So being able to sing in a beautiful way, and kirtan has really been catching me lately. And I see a path there. Prior to maybe the last 18 months, dancing, these practices are places where I could feel devotion in the sense that I could free my body and let myself open. So these practices have helped. But lately, just like actually singing in devotion to creation. God can be a triggering word for many people because of its background for many people in the Western world. But I just like to even refer to the word creation. So being able to sing my praise for how grateful I am for the creation, for existence itself. That is a very beautiful practice. Right? It's hard to step out of that and then have a bad day. It's like, or at least the next couple hours, you're going to feel pretty good. So if that becomes a devotional practice of always remembering that the creation, not to take the creation and the existence itself for granted, for better or for worse.
And so there's a strong element of appreciation and gratitude in that.
Yeah.
And then also I'm seeing the through line of expression through dance and expression through song, and that becomes your prayer.
Yeah, expression is everything for me anyway. And I think for many, we all express in different ways. But yeah, everything is an expression in the creation, right? Being able to express it and be witnessed is really important, right? It wouldn't be the same if I had a lover and I wasn't able to express to my lover, I love you, right? That makes it so much more beautiful to go to your partner and just say, I love you so much. And they say, oh, thank you. Or, oh, I love you so much too. That exchange, when it's witnessed, is so meaningful. So when we take that and we apply that to God or creation itself, which really at a higher level is just you and yourself, you expressing to yourself how grateful you are for yourself, for having created yourself. That's a meaningful exchange. So however you can do that, like I said, for me, I'm doing it through singing right now is really the path I see in front of me for the foreseeable future. I see myself going down more of that path. And it started with you, really, with the Peyote way. That's one of the most beautiful ways I've ever seen to pray. Really, you're just praying through song in ceremony and witnessing each other in that. And with the sacred fire or the light of creation, in that reciprocity, being witnessed, it's really good. It's very well designed. It's very intentionally
Yeah.
designed, right? It's not just some random ceremony. Like the more I sit in ceremony and the more diversity I see, it's just like it's so well designed. Every component of these ceremonies. So you can have a lot more discernment about what ceremonies you'd like to sit in and why. And certain ceremonies for certain periods and certain times. Yeah.
Well, now that you mentioned peyote ceremonies a couple times, and also the Vericuta Desert, maybe we could share a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So Brad and I went down to the Vericuta Desert for a retreat that was put on by the Institute of Ancestral Ceremonies. So that's an organization that I support, and I'm very happy to support, because it is the honoring of these indigenous ceremonial ways, and they do so in such a way that they're actually able to support the indigenous people that carry those ceremonies. So I think it's a really important cause. And yeah, we went down there to Mexico, to the Vericuta Desert, which is the homeland of the peyote medicine. And also part of their cosmology is they really honor and revere the blue deer spirit. And so the blue deer spirit resides in those lands as well.
Yeah.
And we were able to harvest the medicine that was cultivated right there on the land. So cutting it fresh from the ground and consuming it, which is a really massive privilege. We do all this under the direction and support and blessing of the Matakami, which is their traditional medicine man. So it was really incredible for me, and probably the most profound experience I've had with that particular medicine.
Hands down the most profound experience I've had with that medicine.
So I wonder if you want to say more about your experience.
I mean, you just nailed it. It's that set and setting, that the conditions of the ceremony that change everything. I had done peyote a handful of times, maybe 5-6 times or something like that prior to going to the desert, and it felt to me like I had never even, not even close. It wasn't even the same medicine. So all those different factors coming together in collaboration with having the Mirakami, the just being in the desert, the spirit of the blue deer, the pilgrimage out to get there, the actual way the ceremony was conducted, and then of course the actual medicine and eating it raw. There was even like sand. There's still like the sand on it while I'm eating it. I'm like eating the earth, like all these conditions. So it all contributed. It's the homeland of the medicine. So the spirit literally is right there. It lives there. It's completely authentic. And I think that's a huge component. It's going to be more authentic if it's in its home.
Absolutely.
Right? Like if you throw me in the middle of Hawaii, it's not going to be like my full authentic self in a certain way. Most of me will be there, but like there's like it's not my natural place.
Yeah.
So when you put all that together, it's the potency is completely enhanced and more authentic. I think authenticity is the word that comes up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so what did you experience? Like, what was your ceremony like?
My ceremony, I mean, it was very healing. I'm going at the time, especially like I was really going through some difficult challenges around my relationship to the feminine, and specifically deriving all the way back to my relationship to earth. Right. So there's stuff going on that I've been moving through in my like personal life as a human being, my humanity, with trying to reshape, needing to reshape my relationship to women. And just all of it to the feminine, but it derives all the way back to like, what's your relationship to Mother Earth? And yeah, some really beautiful healings were shown to me, and especially in that first ceremony where I actually got to sit like kneel down, hands in the dirt, and just cry, cry for like ignorance. It's essentially ignorance, not for just being. I don't think ashamed, but like I was sad that I wasn't in the best relationship. Like I wasn't in the right relationship as much as I know I can be and I would like to be. So it was a really interesting experience because there's sadness happening simultaneously with like, I'm so joyful that I'm so sad that it's taken me 35 years to get here, but I'm so grateful that it happened. It's happening now. Because you could go a whole lifetime in complete ignorance. You could go many lifetimes in complete ignorance. So I'm so grateful at the same time as being so sad that it's taking this long. And that was the starting part of it. And I guess I'll share one of the most beautiful, this is a really beautiful vision that I've shared with you before, but I was shown the relationship between our sun and the earth. And it was a visual representation and like an energetic and like heart-centered representation of how deep the love story goes between our sun and earth, like how long they've been in love for. And I just couldn't stop crying. I'm like, oh my God, we talk about devotion. This is the most devoted love story ever. And it was just like the earth and the sun going through so many phases together, and how in love they've remained in love this whole time, in the most devoted, sacred, divine love ever. They've been through wars together. They've been through ice ages together. They've been through, and this is all just happening in one vision. I'm like, holy, that is one devoted dude. If we call the sun a guy or a man, the male, I was like, that guy is really committed. That is unconditional love at its highest level. And Mother's just beautiful. Mother's just this divine, beautiful, taking the light of the sun and just creating beauty. It's like, wow. So it actually showed, it was almost like a role model for me. Like, that's how it's done. Because we can take that as the children of this earth, and like, how can we relate to the women and the men? How can the men and the women relate now using that as a model? So for me, that was it. It was like, whoa. That's a pretty wild standard, but that's what's possible. It's not what's possible. It's happening right now. It's in the middle of it, right? It's been going on for billions of years. I don't know how old the earth is, but I think it's 6-7 billion. I don't know. It's like very old.
Yeah. I'm not even going to throw out a number.
Yeah.
But I think they say the universe is around 14 billion, but now they're reconsidering that as well. But the point is, like you say, it's devotional, and these archetypes are there to teach us.
Yeah.
We could personify these different elements, and maybe that's not super accurate, and it's something we tend to do as humans, but there is wisdom there. There are things to be learned from these archetypes. And so in that ceremony in the Vericuta Desert, that was a big theme for me as well. And I think a lot of people, and actually...
you had that beautiful prayer.
I addressed the circle and said a blessing to the feminine, because likewise, I haven't always been in right relationship with the feminine, because it's like I think I chalk it up to conditioning, like my own, what I was exposed to in my adolescence and my whole life, but also what I've been conditioned in as a part of society. We do live in this patriarchy where the woman generally isn't respected and revered as they should be. Like the female element of our experience, they are the life givers. And so without them, without women, without the female aspect of life, there is no life. Yeah. And so really as men, the masculine responsibility is to create a safe container for the feminine to work their magic. Like no more, no less.
Yeah.
And okay, maybe there's a little bit more, a little bit less, but the point is that we have to show up in that, not in a way that exploits women and discredits them for the magical beings that they are. And I think as you speak about this collective transition we're coming into, it's going to take a balanced relationship between the masculine and the feminine to get to that place of transition and create something more beautiful here on Earth.
So building off of that, that's another huge theme. So I've kind of talked a little bit about where I'm going in terms of my devotional practice, but in my own actual humanity and like what I'm here to do, a lot of it has to do with starting with myself, but it's healing the relationship with the feminine and like helping men and women come back to a really beautiful polarity of love where those conditions are available. I recently started a men's group around wanting to have men level up in all the different areas of life, but ultimately to be better partners for women. And it sometimes seems like a tall ask, but if you commit yourself to it, we get what we want, which is that beautiful dynamic. And there's just, I don't even know where to start. I'm so early in this, looking at this dynamic, but it seems to be like a lot of men struggling with the same things, a lot of women struggling with the same things with men. Right? At first I looked at myself and I was like, oh man, I got work to do. But then looking around at other men, it's like, oh man, we all do.
Absolutely. So this is maybe a good time to ask you, or maybe I'll preamble a little bit. My intention for this year, as you know, is to really contemplate love and what love means, not from like a philosophical meta perspective, but from a relational perspective. How does love show up in our relationships? Where does it flow openly and where does it feel more constricted? And what I'm really interested in as well is how, like, what it means to be in love. Like, what is the experience of being in love with a life partner, and how do we define that? And I wonder if you have any thoughts.
How do we define what it means to be in love with a life partner?
Or more importantly, how you experience it. Like, what is the experience like?
Well, I come from a background of a family that has no divorces, and it's families where the grandparents and the grandparents above them and my mom and dad and both sides of the family, like they all got together and stayed together. So it's like at the simplest level, they just commit to each other and went through difficult challenges together without ever severing the relationship. That's like one component, is just actually being there for your family. But there's so many types of love, like you said, right? Like there's just like when I think about my family, it's like I'm not always happy with them. I'm not always in like tight relationship, but I'm always there for them. I think that's a really special part of being in love and loving, is like to be there and support regardless of circumstance. The question's so broad.
Well, yes and no. And so in the periods of your life, I think you're in love now. What's the experience of being in love like?
Well, I am in love right now, and the experience is when I think of that person, it fills me and motivates me to want to be better. So that's I think interesting. When I think of that, it motivates me to want to be a better man because that person deserves it. So that there's like, that's one of the feelings, and it's a warm feeling, and it's literally in my heart. But joy, I think, is like, if I summarized it, it's a feeling of joy. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that because I could presently relate to moments in time where I thought of the significant other woman who I'm grateful to have in my life right now. And it's like, oh yeah, like a smile comes to my face. Like sometimes I just laugh at the beautiful experiences we've shared. And some of them have been like really like ridiculous and playful. And I think that's an element of it too. Maybe is reminiscent of like our childhood, our adolescence.
Yeah.
Right. Where we could just be free and liberated in our expression. And in doing so, it gives them permission. And as a result, we have this reciprocal opening where just more and more of our parts are able to come to the table.
Yeah.
And be accepted and held.
And I think along the lines of accepted, often when I'm in the best joyful experience with a beloved, it's when I feel completely natural with them. And it's kind of an ironic part to it, because it's like when I feel accepted fully and as I am, it makes me feel really joyful and motivated, and then it actually makes me want to be better, which is ironic, right? Because I'm accepted as I am, it makes me want to even improve more.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So then there's this shared growth together, which is really beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. And going back to like, I know you spoke of like love in relationship, like in human dynamic, there's that. And there's this recognition I always have, especially because I just came back from Nepal, and impermanence is like the highest teaching in Nepal. But these moments of joys and these dynamics, they're just changing all the time. So there's a variability to it all, and to be really present with what's in front of you, because you don't know how long things will last, which is very different than the relationship you would have with God or creation, because there's an unchanging part to that. Where as you anchor into that relationship at that higher level, beyond your own, almost beyond your own humanity, there's something different about that love and the stability of that love, which is not it's not transient.
Right.
It doesn't have to be.
Right. The impermanence of the relationship to spirit and our understanding of that would change through time, through our own evolution.
Yeah.
And so I want to circle way back to when you said there was a moment in time where you became aware of that relationship to spirit.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about how that happened?
Like the first insights?
Well, maybe you can include the first insight. There was a life event where it kind of like puts you onto the spiritual path, because before you were having like the kind of standard societal experience.
The very first insight ever in spiritual awareness was in a mushroom ceremony. In my first, maybe my second mushroom ceremony I'd ever done. I had never done recreational mushrooms before.
And what was the catalyzing life event that got you there? Like, why did you? What was the calling?
A woman.
A woman.
Yeah, I went through a breakup after my first relationship ever, 7-year relationship, and we split. And it was the first time I was basically just a stable, happy guy, and that event was the first time I'd ever experienced heartbreak or sadness. Really, the first time I'd ever really authentically experienced grief in my life. And I just thought I'm like, what do you do with this? So some friends who had recently learned about psilocybin had recommended that. They're like, you take here, I think this could be good for you. I was skeptical, but like, try these. It's a psychedelic. Go home, like sit in a room in the dark and just sit there and sit with these. So take them and then sit there. And the first insight was when I realized, so in the mushroom ceremony, basically just I realized there was a split where like my consciousness split from the body, and it also split from my thoughts. So there was a witness point of view to my thoughts, and that's when I first realized that you're not the ego. So the ego is happening. It's like a construct of thoughts, but that's not who you are. And then I freaked out because I call it a positive ego. Positive ego is someone who really likes their identity structure. So they really have they're very fond of the identity that they've built for themselves. So if you're like you really like yourself, the way your identity is. So that's a positive ego structure. So I had a positive ego structure growing up. I loved myself as my ego, and when I split, I freaked out because I was like, no, like if I'm not my ego, then who am I? So then the first question came, which was, who am I? And that became the quest for like 7 years. It took me to start having a basic understanding. And I later learned that is one of the original questions. Who am I? Right? But it took that was kind of traumatic. So it was kind of a traumatic ceremony. But when I realized you're not the ego structure, or you're not the identity structure, I think is a better way a way I prefer to say it, because ego has a whole lot of stuff around it. But identity, if you're not your identity, then who am I? And that became a very confusing time. But I had questions, and so I had to continue. I had to go down the spiritual path because the curiosity was undeniable. You can't just go on with your day building your ego structure if you know that you're not your ego structure. Like it's no longer available. You know too much now. Mm-hmm. So then you have no choice. You basically have to.
You can't look away.
You have no choice. You can't. Yeah.
And so now, do you think you actually have like some clarity on that, or some answers, or is it an answerable question?
Not. I mean, to some degree, but not real. It's an experiential question. You later you realize you're all of it. So at first it was like, I'm not my ego. Now I am, but it's not it doesn't define you.
You're not just
You're all of it. So you have more choice. As you gain awareness and you awaken more, you have more freedom. You have more choice. You can go about your day and be your identity structure for social reasons, and then you can go home and meditate on yourself as light or dark or emptiness. Which one is you? They're both you. But which one is the one that's actually more whole and free? Will you decide? It's up to you, right? But you can choose how you want to spend your life. Relating. How do you want to relate to life, to yourself? And that's, in the indigenous practice, in ceremony, we always say all of our relations, as you know. So we are all of our relationships. And we get to choose which ones we want to feed and be more know ourselves as. And I found that really, like this year in Peru, a lot of my experience was knowing myself as light. And then later on in the year, it was more knowing myself as emptiness. And then I got really pulled back into my own humanity, and I knew myself as my problems. So, and I was aware of it, but I got entrapped by it and by my attachments. And my attachments got even stronger. And then it was just like, just because I know that these aren't the truth, it still didn't change the experience. So then now I'm working my way through that. But it's easier to do it because I know that I'm all my relations. So it's with the higher awareness, I think it's easier to navigate difficulty.
And there's still, even though you have an awareness of impermanence, there's still the practice of non-attachment. And so it's really interesting, and I like that you said in Nepal, because you spoke of there being the Hindu spiritual philosophy as well as the Buddhist spiritual philosophy.
Yeah.
And which of the two had impermanence as like the primary teaching point?
That'd be Buddhism is impermanence.
Okay. And so that's like a first principle that is important for us to collectively orient around, right? To recognize that all things will end, this too shall pass, and return. And once we embrace that, then we also have to embrace our own mortality. Mm-hmm. And so I think a complementary awareness is this idea of reincarnation. Yeah. Right? It's like that takes the edge off of my own personal death. It's like every single thing I love, including myself, will perish. Yeah. But if I know that it comes back around, or my experience will continue, right? It's not like death is not a terminus, but a transition. It's just a ceremony. Then that provides freedom for how we show up in life.
Yes.
And so how do we get people to that place?
Well, you have to do the practices. You have to study. You have to want to be free. So wanting to be free is a really big driver of all of it. And you'll know you want it because you'll feel it. It's a desire. I don't know if I think the world is going to make it that way though. So one of my teachers that I was following for quite a while, he said that the world is changing so fast and it's becoming such a miserable experience to live of the ego that you will automatically, your soul will reprioritize intuitively to higher truth because it's just such a bad experience to live egocentrically. Mm-hmm. So for many hundreds of years now, it's actually been all right to live of the ego. You get a house, get your girl, get family, you have a job, you go down the cycle, you play hockey, right? Like it's actually not that bad. Like it's okay. Are you like an absolute devotional unity consciousness? Like no, but you're also not like absolutely in fear. Like the system is stable.
You're having an experience
that's quite pleasant. You got friends. It's all nice. There's no real need to wake up. Mm-hmm. We're going through something now. You're not going to have a choice. Many of us, I know I'm already there. There is no going back because it's so bad to be of the ego only. It's just such a miserable experience. You're literally in ego consciousness, you're literally outcome oriented. You're trying to build something so that you can grasp onto something that's totally impermanent, that's going to fall apart. And then when it does, you suffer. That's what it's like. So anything you're designing or building right now, if you're not doing it for the actual experience of doing it, the joy, you're literally building things that are impermanent.
Yeah.
So that's outcome orientation, future thinking. So if that's your main priority is planning for the future, you're basically never present with like the creation itself.
Speak about the mandala.
The Buddhist mandala.
Their practice that they do, yeah.
Well, this is one of the biggest ceremonies in Tibetan and Nepali culture, which is by the Dalai Lama. There's some of the greatest monks all over the country. They come and they build this really big, beautiful mandala, which is the wheel of life, which has all the different ways that we fall into suffering, and it symbolizes how to stay in the center, which is joy. Right? How do you actually stay in happy, joyful life? But they make this thing, and it's a practice. It's like one of the most incredible pieces of art. And the moment they finish,
and their tool is like this little thing that like shakes out one bead of
sand at a time, and they like build this thing
for how many days?
I think it's a whole group of them. I think I'm not sure actually on the number. It's probably around 12 though, and it takes 12 days. And then the moment they drop the last bead, they wipe the whole thing away, and they go down to the river. I don't know the whole ceremony.
So they just spent all this time and effort in this like intense meditation for 12 days to create this masterpiece, this absolute like work of art.
Yeah.
And then it's gone.
It's gone. And that's the way of the universe. Everything, it seems like it's here for a long time, but it's technically everything that's getting created, the moment it's immediately changing and transforming. Right? So it represents that everything you do is for the experience, the doing itself, the actual moment in front of you, presence. And none of it is about the outcome, because we don't know what's going to happen or what. It's that attachment to future, which is in higher consciousness, as I understand it, is not real. There is no future. There's just now. So this is a very important reminder that presence with now is everything. And the energy you carry right now is everything. Not the energy I'm going to carry later. This is what I have to offer right now is this. Whatever it is. If I'm a loving presence, that's what I am. If I'm in fear, that's what I am. That's all I have to offer the world is fear if I'm vibrating at the level of fear. It's just energy, right? This reminds us just what is the energy you hold and carry.
So there's a process of awareness of how we're showing up in the moment, acceptance of how we're showing up in the moment, so that we can then intentionally decide how we want to show up. So that there kind of is a cyclical process, but then we also get sucked down into the muck and mire of the human like condition. And there's been bouts of like, what would I call it? There's been bouts of fear in my life. There's been bouts of sadness that last days, and for some people it lasts like weeks, months, years. People live depressed lives, especially in our society. People are just in a constant state of depression.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of, I'm also hearing you describe that culmination point where it's like the ego that's in that state of suffering, and we have to get to a place beyond it to alleviate the suffering.
So it goes back to what you were saying, like, do you have the practices to change your vibration? Mm-hmm. So that means most likely you got to study and do some work and learn some practices to change your vibration.
Well, what's the entry point? Like, what do you think somebody who isn't aware of any of this, like, what is that thing, that pattern interrupt that's going to get them out of that cycle of depression?
What is the pattern interrupt? I think it varies for a lot of people. Some of the pattern interrupts, though, that I would recommend for people, I mean, most people would actually just recommend meditation is like the simplest one, but it's also one of the harder ones. You and I both have connected in dancing. These are also really good ways to get out of the mind. Mm-hmm. So all the suffering it's pretty much mostly happening all in the mind, because the mind is where the judgment lives. And our society is become addicted to thinking. We've become addicted to the importance of thinking. So in the universe, there's like all these components and things that are happening, right? the mind is one of so many things that are occurring in consciousness, and we as a society have like made that like one of the like this is like the highest. Thinking is like basically become almost a reality of its own.
Mm-hmm.
So I often think of like, or feel into like, if you think of a body, like your stomach is like digesting food. That's happening. It's just something that's going on, right? It's doing digestion of and transformation of food into human. It's literally, and this is just
turning Earth.
It's turning human. Earth into human and then returning a human back into Earth. Like this is a process that is happening. And your heart beats literally all the time. It never skips a beat. It's just a happening. Your lungs are breathing. It's literally in reciprocity with trees, changing, transforming prana into carbon dioxide. Like it's just this interchange. Meanwhile, the mind is thinking. It's doing thoughts. But we actually identify with thoughts. But you don't. How often does somebody identify with I am digestion? You don't do that. Why not? I don't know, but you don't. Most people are not like, I am my digestion. I'm the one who transforms raw earth into a human. It's like, no, we get caught up in thinking, and it literally is it's become a mental health epidemic. Because the thinking is, I don't even know what's happened exactly, but we've become addicted to our thoughts and identified with our thoughts, and the thinking is based in judgment. That's part of the biggest issue. We make judgment. This is good, this is bad, I'm winning, I'm losing. I'm good, I'm bad. Like, technically, there's nothing wrong with being in a low vibration. There's nothing wrong. Lower vibrations aren't worse than higher vibrations. They're both, all vibration is important because it's part of the whole. But we judge the lower ones as worse.
Don't be sad.
Yeah, technically, there's nothing wrong with being sad, and it's an impermanent activity. I know because I just went through heartbreak, and it's coming to an end now, so that'll be over now. But rather than being upset about being sad and in heartbreak, I spent the time trying to be present with it because it's not going to last. There's nothing wrong with being sad.
So then it's the stories about being sad that are actually detrimental. So that we have these attachment to the stories that are the identification of our present moment experience. But I liked what you said about the story, like, if my heart stops, I die. If my digestion stops, I die. Mm-hmm. If my mind, like if my thoughts stop, I actually like evolve and transform and transcend. So
you have less barriers.
Superfluous to our experience. Like they don't need to be added to consciousness. Like as we sit here, we're adding quite a bit to our conscious experience as we add words and language and have this discussion.
Yeah.
But if I sit there in nature by a river meditating, my thoughts are actually interfering with my experience. They're not adding anything to it.
That's correct. But I wouldn't argue that thoughts are not important, but they're not as important as we make them. Because to think is also to create. If I want to create a new podcast or a new song on the guitar, I first think about it and then I create it. But it's not appropriate to think in a lot of other situations. So like you go out into nature for a walk, apart from just knowing that where the trailhead starts, thinking is not going to be important for the rest of the day. But because of the addiction, you keep doing it. Mm-hmm. So it's really just bad judgment almost. It's like bad, it's just incorrect use of tools almost. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, it's like you're building a house and all you have is a screwdriver. You need a hammer for that, but I don't need the hammer when I go to like my guitar class. It doesn't make sense now. It's just like we now aren't using the tools correctly. The mind has a place, of course. Everything in the universe is born of complete precision, complete purpose. Everything has purpose. We just have to become good at knowing ourselves and when to use what, I guess.
Yeah, and keeping everything in balance and harmony. Right, that's the theme that we keep coming across is things are just disjointed right now. Like things are out of balance.
Yeah. And like, if we're going to go through this period right now where there's going to be a lot of grief, a lot of sadness, knowing that there's nothing wrong with sadness is going to be really important. And the problem that we're having and we're going to have is that people project. So I've gone through grief, right? I'm going through a heartbreak. Something's really difficult that's happening to me. And then everyone I know goes, oh, I'm so sorry for you. Now they're all projecting that this is not good when there's nothing wrong with it. Like, I know when I meet someone who has heartbreak, I always say, like, enjoy it while it lasts.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it won't last long. You don't have a lot of time to really be present with this period because it's heartbreak heals.
Learn what you got to learn.
Yeah, exactly. Take in the lessons, learn. You're getting some gifts right now. You're getting some lessons. If everyone in your community said that and projected that at you, you would feel very differently about the heartbreak you're going through.
Absolutely.
Right? You're like, oh, and they're like, oh, wow, that's so special. Don't get many of those in your life. I've only had 2. Right? I've had 2 heartbreaks.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you'll have more. Don't worry.
I'll be waiting, right, buddy? Yeah.
So we're touching on this pattern that is pretty undeniable, which is crisis preceding transformation.
Yes.
Every time, right? And so I wish that we had a way of getting to that transformation without the crisis, because I know like the crisis is necessary, the heartbreak, the grief, and everything else, the loss, the impermanence. But there is a level of unnecessary suffering that we seem to expose ourselves to by not like listening to the wisdom of the past or the wisdom of the elders, which is kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
Or the whispers of nature, like recognizing our connection to nature and the divine, one and the same, and learning how to be rather than waiting for like systemic collapse to then be like, oh, this is what we should have been doing all along. And
so you want to talk about how we can reduce the suffering as we go through the transformation?
Was it worse, like even from this place of like knowing, right? So say we know something that we think is worth sharing because it's going to be supportive of others. Is it worth banging the drum, or do we have to let people just like earn their wisdom?
I think you can do both, because you can bang the drum all you want, and sometimes people will still learn their own wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
But the spaces are going to keep opening to move through this stuff. Like all these different trends that are going on, like breath work, right? You're learning to know yourself as prana, right? Like there's a lot of stuff you can be doing, but you're still going to have to learn the hard way, many people. That's what I think. I don't know if you can reduce the suffering like a ton.
So this, I want to kind of like put it into context. The Christopher Beige, you started reading his book.
Yeah.
For the listener, LSD and the Mind of the Universe, subtitle Diamonds from Heaven by Christopher Beige. I don't know how many times I've spoke about it on this podcast, but it's going to continue to come up thematically because he does speak about the human condition, evolutionary experience through incarnation. And he also speaks about the collective transformation, and what he frames it as is the crucifixion of humanity. Like that's the scale of suffering that he predicts.
He's using the word crucifixion.
Crucifixion of humanity. It's going to take that level of suffering to get us to this place of evolution for the next like phase of human experience.
So I think I resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't know, but from what I've seen in my own life that I can recall, so this life and then just history, that typically seems to be how it is. But if you can start to know yourself at a higher way, that will help you through it, because you can still now suffer at a human level, knowing that you're not dying. You're not going to die. And that becomes very important. Right? So you're going to die. The physical body is going to, it's not even going to die. In Nepal, they don't use the word death. They just call everything transformation. They call everything reincarnation, or again, because reincarnation has so much baggage, I just call it reintegration. Right? So everything will reintegrate to continue the life cycle of growing, of learning and evolution. So if you know yourself at that level, then the actual humanity of it might be a bit easier. So I would say that's part of the path, is to take on practices for higher awareness, to know yourself in higher ways. And some of the easiest ones are the earth-based practices. Learn to know yourself as the breath. Learn to know yourself as light by just building a relationship with the sun. Learn to know yourself as literally earth. And we know and this is what I really love about the earth-based practices, is that we all know this, even at an intellectual level. We know that we are the water. We know this scientifically. We know that the water carries the intelligence. So if we can learn to know ourselves at those levels and not just as the ego, this is going to help a lot.
Yeah, like the embodied wisdom of that. Because the intellectualized awareness that we are water hasn't prevented people from polluting the water, right? And
No,
so
it hasn't.
We're actually in a precarious position collectively as we continue to destroy these natural elements, right? So it's a process of irreverence as we ignore all of our relations. We're not caring for these elements like we're meant to, right? We're meant to be stewards of the earth.
And so those where the practices come in, like we were talking about. What are the practices, right? In the Peyote way, we sing, but different songs and prayers are for all sorts of different things. But some of those songs are to pray for the sun, to know yourself in that way. Some of the songs are just literally praying to the water. Like we're drinking water right now, to even just give gratitude and like, this is a part of me. Like those are like the actual actionable things you can do. Or like Agdar's told us, pray for your food and recognize that food is going to become who you are. Mm-hmm. So those are the actual things you can do, like doings. Mm-hmm. It's not just intellectualized fully. So it has to slowly getting the mind to align, but then dropping it into the body.
Right. So don't tell me what you think, tell me what you do, right? It's not about propositional knowing. It's about the practice embodiment. And that's where I think people have to arrive at, right? And maybe that means sitting in ceremony. Maybe it means just having a sit spot, a meditation place in the woods. Maybe it means doing a water ceremony. And there's all these different ways for us to connect with our environment and to allow culture to be a reflection of our place, right?
Yes.
So things are relevant. So we're not just this displaced person not knowing where they come from.
Yeah, and we are such adaptable beings. We become our environments. Coming back from Nepal, it really dawned on me that some of the work that I not want to do, but I'm going to need to do in my life, I'm not going to be able to do it here very effectively because my culture is of ego. Our culture here is still mostly the ego consciousness, so it's very hard to transcend that on your own. Like it's way more difficult. Whereas like going to Nepal and everyone is in relationship with the Shiva energy, so it just makes it so much more. The field is so much thinner or thicker. I don't even know which one, but like the field of belief, you become that. You become the field of belief. So as more people keep waking up to higher and higher levels, like it will vicariously just kind of ripple through.
Right.
Like someone who meets you, I'm sure every time they meet someone who meets you is probably like, huh.
What's wrong with that guy?
No, maybe. Or maybe they're like spending some time with you and they're going to be like, huh, like I feel different. Maybe you know why, maybe you don't. It's like, but if there's like a whole room of guys like you talking about things in the way you talk about things, or maybe even me, it's like, that does change things.
Yeah. And I think that's why it's important, like you said, for your evolution, potentially it would be expedited in a different place where there's a different resonance or field of belief.
Yeah.
But it's also important for us to be in the marketplace, is the metaphor, right? Like anybody could go to the cave and be enlightened, but the challenge is when we're in the marketplace with a bunch of like quote unquote unenlightened people, can we then maintain that vibration and allow that to ripple out? So it is places like in our Western world, in our present society, where we do have individuals that are going to help like simplify that, right? And what we're getting to is a place where we have to create our own culture, because there is no sense of culture in mainstream society. It's lost.
Yeah.
These different ideas of connection to the earth while also having connection to the divine isn't like prevalent.
So we have to build it. We're part of the building phase.
And it's going to be a intergenerational project. We're not going to complete the project in this lifetime.
But this is also part, like, you're right, you don't want to run away to a cave or me run away to Nepal. But if you prioritize world travel to go pick up wisdom and you bring gifts home, that is a different thing. It's like, so I didn't say I want to go to Nepal and just live there, but it's like I want to go there, embody those frequencies and that truth and that understanding, and then come home and just be what I am. That has a tremendous impact. Yeah. And every time, just like us going to the desert, we came home and we're going to be vibrating in a different way and sharing in a different way. Absolutely. And then that comes home to the community, wherever you are, where you want to build.
And so in that is an element of accountability as well, right? Accountability to return home, accountability to then do our work, to devote to what is ours to do. And that makes me think of your King Up program that you're co-creating and leading right now. And perhaps you could tell us about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's inspired by me not being by an experience I went through in 2022 and most of 2023 is just really realizing that I wasn't the type of man that I want to be. And King Up's just a funny word for it, but it's like I wasn't embodying the divine masculine, the sacred divine masculine that I wanted to be, and I put myself in a situation where I wasn't. It wasn't the right conditions to be able to become that man. So I struggled because of that. And using myself as the avatar of what I don't want, I created it with a couple of friends to help me start moving myself in the direction of where I do want to be. And so it started out as an accountability group with some friends, and then we realized we had something. And for a lot of men, like, it's the simplicity. Accountability is one of the key features of it. It's not what the group's about, but a lot of men are missing that accountability in their life and that integrity with what they say they want, to just like actually do what you say you want to do and be held accountable to that by your fellow man. So yeah, some of the best products in the world or services in the world stem from creating something you need for yourself. And the men have a lot of work to do, and we need more and more containers. So this is not the container, but it's already a trend happening right now, especially in North America. Men's work is arising in a lot of different varieties, and I'd say there's a place for all of them. And so a big part of that is being resourceful. I'm starting to connect with different men's group leaders, not because I'm competing with them. That's got to go away. Those kinds of ideas, and these are my competition men's groups. It's like, no, this is collaborations to help men rise. So we need to actually be in collaboration. And if someone comes into my container and it's not the right fit, I need to be able to resource them to the correct groups. That's another paradigm that's going to be going away. This is competition, right? Which is part of individuation mentality.
Right. Absolutely.
So
coming together to co-create something more beautiful because we're stronger together.
Yeah. And I want to embody the sacred divine masculine. And my experience showed me that I was not doing that. And so that's the time for me to do that. And I've had intuition since I've realized this. And Spirit's been guiding me, saying, yes, you're on the right track. This is what you're here to do. It's at least this phase. I believe that we have different missions in our life. And sometimes missions can last a year. Sometimes you have a mission that lasts you 10 years. And that at the completion of one mission, usually a new mission arises. And so I feel like a big part of my next decade has to do with helping men to rise into that sacred divine masculine role. It starts with yourself.
Beautiful. Where can people find out more about that or sign up?
For that particular program is you can go to foundations.theend.com, and it's one of the tabs. You can click in there and jump on a discovery call with myself or one of the other group leaders, see if it's a good fit. And yeah, it's a mastermind for accountability. You can read more about it. There's a little video on it too. But it's about men's work. It's about wanting to improve as a man. Really attract, in all honesty, to being able to attract a beautiful queen and knowing actually how to honor them and keep them. If you don't embody the qualities that deserves to be with a queen, then you just won't be able to hold on to it. So it's a lot of it's that exploration. I want to learn that. So
The sacred union.
It's about sacred union. I want that. That's what I want. I can't think of anything better than like being unified with the polarity, unifying the polarities into like a sacred union with like God. Like it just sounds so beautiful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So no, I don't have the answers to all that, but I want to know more. I want to learn.
Do you have any closing thoughts or anything you want to share with the audience?
My closing thoughts and shares. It's often the same thing, and it's really the encouragement to decide to take life in a spiritual way, because it's so beautiful. And that's where I think most of us will find what we're looking for in life. So somebody invites you to the next ceremony or a breathwork something or anything to do with that stuff, I think any tools that will help bring peace into your life will be very valuable for your lifetime, because I think this transformation is going to be going on for a couple hundreds of years. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thanks, brother. Thanks for sharing your perspective, your worldview, your wisdom, and with me, your friendship.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Stoked to be here.
Peace. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to this episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment and perhaps sharing with others. And if you are curious about some of the services I offer, you can check out my website, connectionintegration.com. You'll see on there that I offer one-on-one support and guidance based around spiritual and mental wellness. I also offer nature connection experiences and plant medicine retreats throughout the year. Until next time, wishing you much curiosity, wonder, and peace as you open yourself up to the wild, tameless. Be well.